And if you say okay, then that's you showing us that you're consenting to be recorded. Again, this will just be sent out to folks who are attending the meeting so that they can catch up on anything that they may not have been able to see. Also, just like I said, please use the chat or the raise hand feature, to get in touch with me while Doris and Rosillo are presenting. And then again, if you have any questions, we'll put this at the end, but that if you have any questions, you can email newengland@mhttcnetwork.org. And that is the best place to get any questions answered. We'll also make sure that Rosillo and Doris share their emails so that you can reach out to them with any content questions that you might have. So I'm going to move us on. We do this at the beginning of all MHTTC webinars and really love it. We use affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all activities. That language is strengths-based and hopeful, inclusive and accepting of diverse cultures, genders, perspectives, and experiences, healing, centered, and trauma responsive, inviting to individuals participating in their own journeys, person first and free of labels, non-judgmental and avoiding assumptions, respectful, clear, and understandable, and the last one, consistent with our actions, policies, and products. And so that's what we stand by, and we hope that you will join us in that today as we go through our presentation. I have no doubt, considering that we are all here to talk about trauma, so I'm sure that we are going to be able to find a way to communicate in a trauma-informed manner. As well, I can give you a little bit of an oversight over the wide variety of MHTTC regions. So right now we are in the New England MHTTC region that you see in green, but all of these other ones also have their own regions, and you can feel free to check out their websites for more insight about what they're doing in their individual spaces. An overview about our New England MHTTC. We use evidence-based means to disseminate evidence-based practices across the New England region. Our area of focuses are recovery-oriented practices, recovery support services within the context of recovery-oriented systems of care. Also, to ensure the responsiveness of our work, we will actively develop and maintain a network of people with lived experience, government officials, policymakers, system leaders, administrators, and community stakeholders, providers, researchers, youth and adults, and family members from each of the 6 states to guide the New England MHTTC activities. Get you a little bit of a chance to check out our guiding principles based on respect, resilience and recovery, emerge from hope, family and person driven, occurring via many pathways, community-based and promoted through collaboration, holistic, supported by peers and allies, supported through relationships and social networks, culturally based and influenced, supported by addressing trauma like we're doing today, and also involving the individual, family, and community, strengths and responsibility. So that is a little bit of a background on today's session. And I am going to go ahead and stop sharing and turn it over to the incredible Rosillo Chang and Doris Maldonado.
Thank you so much, Lee. I really appreciate it that I'm here sharing this with all of you, and you will help me to letting me know if you can see the screen. Can you see my screen? Yes, awesome. Okay, so my name is Rosillo Chanangulo. I'm a clinical psychologist in the Department of Psychiatry at UConn Health. I'm also part of the Health Disparity Institute at University of Connecticut. My office is located in West Hartford, Connecticut, and I'm truly honored to be here sharing with you a curriculum that I find it super helpful. I hope that you find it too. And I really appreciate that I'm partnering and co-facilitating this curriculum with Doris Maldonado, who will be introducing herself a little bit too, and then we are going to start with the presentation. Doris, would you like to say something about yourself?
Thank you. Buenos dias. My apologies in advance for not having being able to share my screen. With Zoom and my computer have been wonky the past week. Again, my name is Doris Maldonado Mendez. I'm happy to be with you and with Dr. Chang. We've presented this a couple of times over. I have a master's degree in foreign language education. I'm a guardian ad litem for children in placement. I am a health information specialist and certified community health worker for PATH and a public policy liaison. I am also certified in youth mental health for families and first aid. I'm the chair and the first Latina chair of the Connecticut Council on Developmental Disabilities. And I am also on several councils nationally and statewide. I am navegadora de salud Latina comunitaria. So I'm a Latina health community health navigator. And I work with special needs and as well as research for youth and Husky for immigrants in the state and out of the state. I am very pleased and happy to be with you all. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and we'll have a session throughout and afterwards if you have any questions, and a review as well. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. So many roles, Doris. I'm truly impressed. So the way that we want to share with you the curriculum is I hope that we will have the opportunity for you to ask questions, just like Doris said. You know, there is a lot of information here, and this curriculum was developed. This is version 2 of the curriculum. So version 1 was developed by an amazing colleague, Dr. Monique Kumalo, who is also a psychologist with a lot of experience working in the juvenile justice system. And since then, there has been, through the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, the version 2 was developed just to add more components about racial trauma and about, I would say, about how trauma impacts the lives of people of color. So I think that these contributions have been added, and there has been an amazing group of committed clinicians who have put together more resources into this curriculum to highlight these themes. So, so what else can I tell you? I can tell you a little bit more about the curriculum as we go along. You will see how it goes, but I think that for now, I'm going to start. And one last thing before I start, I like to always start the presentations by telling you that what I'm going to cover here, what we are going to cover here are not absolutes. They are giving you obviously different ways that we could continue within information, and hopefully it can serve you to bring this information and apply some of the sharing here to the work that you do. But definitely, you know, there are no absolutes, and this is something that you are gonna, I'm pretty sure that you're gonna know how to apply it in the context where you are at. So let's see. Now, I mean, thank you for sharing your names. I really welcome you, and I really appreciate that you are spent this morning. You're spending it with us. So the National Child Traumatic Stress Network mission is to raise the standard of care and improve access to services for traumatized children, their families, and communities throughout the United States. And through the network, if you go to www.nctsn.org, you will find tons of resources. They are all available for free. We have free webinars, we have free curriculums, we have free fact sheets, everything about trauma for children and families that you can think of and that you cannot think of is in there. And we do have some materials available in Spanish and other languages as well. So I will encourage you to check us out. So this curriculum is based on 4 modules. And the first one that I'm going to cover today is about trauma and justice involvement. Maybe we're going to have a little bit of time to cover a little bit of module 2, which is the trauma's impact on development. And then module 3 focuses on trauma in context and coping. And module 4 focuses on trauma and staff wellness. Self-care is super important, as we know. And many times this is something that we don't address too much, but I'm glad that in this curriculum, we're able to touch, we're able to cover that as well. So when we talk about trauma, you know, the first thing to that many of us could start asking ourselves is why think about trauma, right? And obviously you are here because you are already thinking about it, and that's a good thing. And one of the things is that this curriculum will help us to understand how we can explain behavior, which is directly linked to how we handle it, okay? And trauma is not an excuse for behavior, but an explanation for it. And understanding the impact of trauma give us more tools to do our job, make everyone safer, and help youth build healthier lives and better futures. And you know, I think that because we are all adults, and I can see the spectrum of you know, younger adults to adults in general, we probably know that, you know, trauma is something that could happen to all of us. And, you know, the more that we live, the longer that we live, the more potential for us to experience trauma. So, you know, what we will be covering here might also be talking to us personally, relating to some of the things that we might have already experienced too. And I hope that you will find some good skills that maybe you already are using, but, you know, many times when we listen or when there are, you know, different ways that we could continue the conversation, that is also very helpful. All right. So when we talk about trauma, one of the important things that we need to focus on is how we do self-care, right? This topic is really heavy, and it's important for us that if there is something in the content that triggers us, that we can give each other a space to do what we need to do in order to keep on taking care of ourselves. So that could be, you could step out and take a break. You can talk to someone you trust, or you can do something that can help you regulate. And, you know, we could also talk a little bit about some of the things that can help us regulate. And for, obviously, because we are unique and special individuals, you know, what works for me might not work for you, but the idea is to use our senses in order to help ourselves regulate. So, you know, you can use your taste, you can use your seeing things that are soothing. You can use some of the tactile things, you know, that can help you to soothe. Listening to something nice. And what else am I forgetting in the other sense? Let's see, there are 5. Listening, taste, touch, and smell, right? So you do some of these to regulate yourself, and sometimes we do it even not too aware that we are doing it, but this is important for us to know that there are some things that we can all do. And oftentimes what I say and I try to practice is that sometimes we don't even need to do it, but it's really important to keep in our savings self-care account some extra things that we can do to ourselves. So when something happens, then we do have extra supplies to deal with it. All right, so the learning objectives for Module 1 is to define trauma and describe how it differs from everyday stress, view behaviors through a trauma lens. And literally, many times when I first started teaching about trauma, my idea was to go to the dollar store and just buy those nice glasses. And I was picturing like glasses that are big and that we can all wear them and we can say really. So many times that's a good illustration that that we can really help ourselves to see things through other lenses that can also help us become more open and become more understandable of things, of situations. And the last one of the learning objective is to better understand the role of resilience and recovery in buffering the effects of traumatic events and promoting health and development. So the questions that I want you to keep in mind for now is how you define trauma and what is it that makes something traumatic as opposed to just stressful, okay? And I don't know how many of you have watched this movie. It came out, I believe, in early 2000, and the name is Freedom Riders. And it is based on a true story. And this is a particular clip that we pick because it helps us to illustrate what we would like to keep on weaving in with trauma. And you are meeting here a teacher who is, for the first time she's teaching. This is her first day in this new school. And the school was already going through a transition. So the transition was that now they were opening the doors to students from different backgrounds. And this is what you're going to see. And I want you to observe what's happening and how you can, how you could sort of weave in the information with the two questions that I asked you. All right, so Lee, because I already did the trick, I hope it's gonna work. Let me see. Yeah, it's the share sound, so we can do it. And I'm gonna start from the beginning.
My name is Erin Gruel. Welcome to Freshman English.
I get this bitch a week.
Hi. Okay, Brandy Ross, Gloria Muniz, Alejandro Santiago, Andre Bryant, Eva Benitez, Eva, not Eva, Ava. I have to go to the bathroom. Okay, make sure that you take it. Yeah, I know. Ben Samuels.
That white boy hoping he's in the wrong room.
We gotta get out of here.
Cindy Nagor. Right here. Is that correct? Jamal Hill.
Man, what am I doing in here? So ghetto ass class got people in here looking like a bad rerun of Cops. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Shoot.
Are you Jamal?
Yeah.
Well, for some reason they have you registered in this class.
Man, that's some bullshit.
It's the dumb class, cuz. Means you're too dumb.
Man, say it to my face, cuz.
I just did. You see what I mean? Dumb.
Man, I know you ain't talking to me.
Okay.
Look, homie, I'll beat that ass, homeboy.
Can you please sit back
Look,
down?
I got your spot on the scene. That's why you're over there wagging your tongue.
Please sit back in your seat.
Look, your spot is good as gold. I don't know why you keep wasting your time coming to practice with them 2-year-old ladies on your feet.
Man, you don't know nothing about me, cuz.
Okay.
Broke down my whole situation.
Jamal?
Show you my face down, right? Sit your fuck ass down. Sit your fuck ass down. I'm running ass. Sit your ass down. What's up, homie? I mean, what's good, man? Sit your ass down, homie.
Excuse me, may I please get some help in here?
What's up, man? Some old something, cuz you ain't saying something. Just sit down, homie. I'm not gonna tell you again. You hit my face now, right? Sit your ass back down.
Don't even worry about it. I'ma see you.
Homeboy. Tell him. Sit his ass down.
Sit your ass
Thank you,
down.
man. I'm out of here, man. That's some bullshit.
Aaron? Aaron, this is Ryan Guilford. He teaches junior English and the Distinguished Honors class.
Oh, hi, Erin Gruel. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. You saw a little action today, I hear.
It happened so fast.
Well, don't be discouraged. You put your time in a few years, you'll be able to teach juniors. They're a pleasure. By then, most of your kids will be gone anyway.
What do you mean?
Well, eventually, they just stop coming.
Well, if I do my job, they might be lining up at the door. Right?
Nice.
All right. So I hope that you enjoy this clip. I'm gonna go next here. So does this behavior look familiar to you? And if it does, in what ways are the characters in this story like the youth you work with? I don't know how many of you work with youth or have had work with youth, but if you have that type of experience, would you mind sharing it in the chat? And if there is any sharing, please let us know. Okay,
Will do.
thank you. I also would like to ask you, so what beliefs do the staff in the clip have about this youth? So what do you think? And the other question is, what do you believe contributes to the way these these young people think, feel, and behave? So, sometimes it's hard to write very quickly in the chat. I think that if you are okay, you can unmute yourself and share something. We would love to hear you.
Yeah, Carmen sharing that I think answering question number 3 about what contributes the society that they live in. I'd say that's very accurate. And then Norma shared, very familiar. I find people come in strong, wanting to help the youth. After seeing youth give up, so do adults.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for your sharing. Okay. Is there anything else? Any more sharing before we move to the next one?
I think we have a really great comment from Phillips Health Ministry about also Hollywood typecasting youth of color, which often feeds into further microaggressions that our youth experience. And I totally agree. If you've seen this or like The Blind Side, it's a classic, white savior trope that I think can be, deconstructed by folks like the ones in our group today.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your participation. And, I wish we could do this in person because definitely, we can definitely talk a little bit more than that. But I really appreciate that you're making the effort and writing your comments in the chat. Or, I think that we are a group that is not so big. So I hope that you could feel okay also talking to us. That would be really, you are more than welcome to do that. All right. Okay. So now I'm going to share you another part of this clip. And this is some of the students were not very hopeful that this teacher was going to survive after the first day, right? Norma was sharing that sometimes, adults get tired too. So, and this teacher kept on persevering and kept on trying to do her best. She had great goals for all of her students. And part of having great goals and believing in her students, I believe that she believed in them before they believed in themselves. And, she tried different ways to reach out to them. So one day, if you have watched the movie, I think that you will remember this part. If you haven't, I don't want to spoil the whole thing for you, but I want to give you some context. So, this teacher comes one day and she brings the notebooks that you see at the desk, on the desk. And, she's telling her students, here, these notebooks are for you. I want each of you to come and get one. And she's sitting there, at her desk, and she's telling them, to come and get one notebook, one journal. And, the students are like confused. They don't know what's happening. But, in groups, there is always the bravest one, right? So one girl just comes out and picks the notebook up, and then everybody else keeps on following her. The amazing thing about what this teacher does, that if I would have an opportunity to meet with her, I would ask a few questions in terms of, she really had a very good sense of how she could reach out to these kids. So she was sitting down at her desk when the kids were coming and picking these journals or notebooks from her. And that really created, and I believe, without words, a more equal sort of a standard, even though she was the teacher and the students are the students, right? So, so the instruction for this teacher was, you got the notebooks, you got your journals. What I want you to do is I want you to write. And it doesn't matter what you write, but I want to see writing here. So I'm not going to grade you for your grammatical errors or the content of what you're writing, but I'm going to grade you for the effort that you are writing. You can even copy poems or songs or whatever, but I just need you to start writing. And and if you want me to read what you write, so the students were instructed just to, show her that they were writing. But she went one step up and she said, if you want me to read what you write, there is a locker here that I am the only one that have access to, and it's going to be secure, it's going to be locked. And, and if you want me to read what you write, I will read it, right? So this is an evening that the teacher is in the school, and this is the first parents conference. So the teacher gets ready with her lemonade and her cookies and, with a banner welcoming parents, and guess how many parents show up? Any guesses?
None.
None. That's correct. Zero, zipo, nada. So, then she has time to do this, and she remembers the instructions, her instructions, and she checks the locker. And here she finds out, surprise, that everybody in her classroom left a journal, left a notebook for her to read. So this is what we're going to watch. And, for the ones that haven't watched this movie, this is heavy. This is really something really difficult to see, to watch. Okay, so just want to prepare you for this.
In every war, there is an enemy. I watched my mother being half beaten to death and watched as blood and tears streamed down her face. I felt useless and scared and furious at the same time. I could still feel the sting of the belt on my back and my legs. One time, he couldn't pay the rent, and that night he stopped us on the street and pointed to the concrete. He said, "Pick a spot."
Clyde was my boy. He had my back plenty of times. We was like one fist, me and him, one army.
Heavy, yeah. It's the real shit right here. Nobody jumps us now. We gotta practice, cause this got power. You shoot it, it throw you out.
I sat there till the police came. But when they come, all they see is a dead body, a gun, and a nigga. They took me to juvenile hall. First night was the scariest. Inmates banging on the walls, throwing up their gang signs, yelling out who they were, where they from. I cried my first night. Can't never let nobody know that. I spent the next few years in and out of cells. Every day I'd worry, when will I be free?
My brother taught me what the life is for a young black man. Do what you have to. Pimp, deal, whatever. Learn what colors to learn. Gang boundaries. You can stay on one corner, you can't stay on another. Learn to be quiet. A wrong word can get you popped.
If you look in my eyes, you'll see a loving girl. If you look at my smile, you'll see nothing wrong. If you pull up my shirt, you'll see the bruises. What did I do to make him so mad?
At 16, I've seen more dead bodies than a mortician. Every time I step out my door, I'm faced with the risk of being shot. To the outside world, it's just another dead body on the street corner. They don't know that he was my friend.
During the war in Cambodia, the camp stripped away my father's dignity. He sometimes tries to hurt my mom and me. I feel like I have to protect my family.
I was having trouble deciding what candy I wanted. Then I heard gunshots. I looked down to see that one of my friends had blood coming out of his back and his mouth. The next day, I pulled on my shirt and got strapped with a gun I found in an alley by my house.
I don't even know how this war started. It's just two sides who tripped each other way back. Who cares about the history behind it? I am my father's daughter, and when they call me to testify, I will protect my own no matter what.
Nobody cares what I do. Why should I bother coming to school?
My friends are soldiers, not of war, but of the streets. They fight for their lives.
I hate the cold feeling of a gun against my skin. It makes me shiver. It's a crazy-ass life. Once you're in, there's no getting out.
Every time I jump somebody in and make someone a part of our gang, it's another baptism. They give us their life, we give them a new one. I've lost many friends who have died in the undeclared war.
So if you could share in the screen, what was your reaction as you watched the clip? What events did you see that you consider traumatic? And what types of traumatic events have the clients or the people who you serve have experienced? What do you know? And feel free also to unmute yourself. No takers on this one. No. Okay, all right. So obviously many of the stories that were shared in the journal had a great traumatic content, right? And they were like traumas that unfortunately for many of these youth happened very early in their lives. And this trauma was not one type, or it was not one time, right? They were like, for the most part, what they were describing was a group of different traumatic types, and also traumas that happen to them for prolonged periods of times, right? Unfortunately, for some of the kids who were in this class, they kept on witnessing or experiencing trauma, even during the present time. So, so this is what we are going to talk about. We are not talking about one particular type of trauma. We're talking about many times what we have defined as developmental trauma that happens very early in a person's life, many times complex trauma, and chronic trauma, because, you know, there are different types of trauma. It happens by the people who are supposed to protect children, and many times, you know, it happens for prolonged periods of times, which is something that makes it even harder to understand, grasp, and to live with. Okay, so when we talk about what is potentially traumatic, what is a potentially traumatic event, we focus on the 3 E's of trauma exposure. So we want to consider more and learn more about what are the type of events that are potentially traumatic, what type of experiences are perceived as a result of these events, and what are the effects? What are the things that are coming out as a result of what the kids have lived through, okay? So many times with trauma, a person can see it, can witness what's happening. Many times children witness trauma happening to their loved ones, the people who are closest to them. For instance, in situations of domestic violence, or, you know, substance abuse, or living in neighborhoods that are very, community violence is involved. So those situations. Then the other group that many times is affected are the groups that might be, you know, might be exposed day in and day out with witnessing trauma, right? So we have here probation officers, you know, many times teachers, many times people who are serving others in many different roles. You might also be exposed to potentially traumatic events, and that might also cause us some, our body might respond towards it, and we might have some situations related to trauma, even though it's not something that we live through. And, you know, and we also know that if people live in neighborhoods where there is community violence, there is a lot of different potential traumatic events happening in these neighborhoods. You know, it might not be in their households, but it might be in the context that they are around it, that can be experienced as potentially traumatic events for different groups, okay? So when we talk about events, we talk about exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violation, okay? When we talk about experiences, we talk about how a person experiences a potentially traumatic event can vary from person to person, but with trauma, the event is experienced as harmful. And the effects are traumatic events that can have short and or long-term adverse effects on a person's physical, social, emotional, and spiritual health that may show up immediately or later in a person's life, okay? So what you can do? sometimes what we can do is we can ask ourselves, has the youth or anybody who you are serving experienced a traumatic event, and consider how experiencing a traumatic event impacts how youth feel in detention settings or in other settings that you work with, right? So we are focusing here in juvenile justice, but I know that this can be applicable for other contexts as well. And one of the things, with this movie that's based in a real life story situation, it is super easy to see these kids and say, wow, we could have different assumptions about, they are misbehaving, they are disrespectful, and it's not that they are not, but like there are so many different labels that we can give to these kids. And then, we slow down, we start asking, questions about what happened to them. And then we realize that, their full systems, their whole bodies, their whole brains are actually in a survival mode, even as we are relating to them in the present time. And, and trauma is impacting the way that they can relate to others, the way that they see themselves, and the way that they see the world. Okay, so this is important for us to also keep in mind. So when we talk about juvenile justice and youth exposure to trauma, is the numbers show they're really drastic numbers, right? The percentages. 93% of juvenile offenders reported at least one or more traumatic experiences, and on average, reporting at least 6, with traumatic loss representing the most common exposure. And there are different types of losses, right? And this is really huge. Now, these are the types of trauma that kids who are involved in the juvenile justice endorse. Traumatic loss, separation and bereavement, domestic violence, and the percentages, if you see, are pretty high, right? Over 60% traumatic loss, separation, bereavement, over 50% report domestic violence, emotional abuse 50%, physical abuse 40%, community violence about 45%, experiencing neglect 30%, physical abuse 25%, sexual assault, rape about 25%, sexual abuse 25%, school violence is about 25% too. So you can see that these types of trauma are very serious and the percentages are high.
Rosillo, if I can jump in, we had an amazing message come through in the chat that I would love to share if you have any.
Yes.
It came from Philip's Health Ministry. My apologies that I don't know the individual behind it, but Philip's Health Ministry showing up and giving us some great comments. Also, the perpetrator of the violence appears to have probably been a victim themselves. I thought that was an important one to mention, that the young boy on the bench that accidentally shot himself had been a victim of bullying. So getting a gun was his response to ensure his own safety. Unfortunately, violence is never the corrective response to violence. That just continues the cycle. And so I wanted to flag that. It was a really good share. So thank you so much, and continue folks to add your thoughts and experiences into the chat so that we can add them to the conversation.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that comment. And yes, please feel free to keep adding up. This is we are all adult learners, and we can, keep on helping each other. And definitely, there is, we're going to have opportunities, a little bit of more opportunities to talk about intergenerational trauma, historical trauma, and, many times the trauma that a person goes through and is not attended to can also impact the way that we will keep on relating to each other, and we will keep on relating to ourselves. So thank you. Now, here SAMHSA, which is really the federal government, part of the federal government that is sponsoring many of the grants that help us continue with the discussions and the training about trauma and many other important topics, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, proposes that 6 principles to consider when we talk about trauma-informed systems. So the first one is safety. The other one is trust, empowerment, collaboration, peer support and trauma competence, and cultural, historical, linguistic, and gender responsiveness. And we are going to elaborate in each principle as we go along. So, you know, in systems, and when I mention systems, is that, you know, like as a human beings, we have our own individual system, right? Like of our own person, that's how I call it. But then there are many different systems outside and different people who can make a true impact in our lives, like the government, you know, different groups, different communities. But, you know, many times safety is something that gets truly affected when a person goes to trauma, right? The sense of safety is something that is impacted because definitely when you witness a traumatic event or where you live through a traumatic event, your own individual system process that level of danger, that level of life or a life or a death situation. And when that happens, right, that's one of the things that our individual system really gets wired towards protecting us and towards not preventing any other type of situation as much as possible that is going to make us feel, you know, the same threat. So safety is the number one and a very good principle to consider when we are, you know, building a trauma-informed system in our own work environment, with our own families, you know, hopefully in our own countries, and, you know, you can go on and on and on, right? If we don't feel safe, many other things are really difficult to keep on building up. So this is a very good foundation, and that's why you can see that it's like the main one, right? And then, you know, obviously the principle of trusting comes out because it's truly important, you know, in order to develop healthy relationships, you need to trust the other. Empowerment is very important as well. Working in collaboration, this work, we cannot do it alone. We really need to be part of communities. We really need to support each other to keep on working. Peer support and trauma competence is a must in the work that we do, right? We learned a lot from peers, and we also need to elevate all the voices. Everybody needs to be heard. And, you know, definitely we come from many different, with many different backgrounds, many different cultures that make it even rich and more opportunities for us to learn from one another. You know, we come with our own history, you know, language is super important. And, you know, we definitely need to make sure that we include also our gender responsiveness. So I hope that you all agree with this statement that we learn by experience. And if you all agree with this, then we're going to keep on building this up. And, you know, think about a very nice day as today that, you know, it's sunny and you might have some break and you want to, you know, go to a nice place with in a forest, and you are walking and enjoying the sun. And all of a sudden you see this, right? So think about how your body and your brain reacts towards this experience. What is the first thing that you might do? What is it? I can tell you I'm not too fan of snakes. So if I see this, I probably, depending on my day, I'm gonna freeze or I'm going to run and scream. Okay. So there is a part of our brain that sort of really is very equipped to help us manage these situations that are very unexpected and that, and that you need to survive. And that part of the brain is the amygdala. We're going to talk a little bit more as we go along, but it acts as an alarm center. So whenever your amygdala sees something and it sort of perceives as dangerous, then there is something that your whole body is going to really become activated for you to survive the moment. Okay. Now, here it is how your body might respond if you are afraid of snakes. Okay. One of the things that happen is that there are two hormones that get released after your amygdala perceives danger. And one is the adrenaline, okay, and the other one is cortisol, all right? When the adrenaline gets released, right, your heart starts, racing. So you feel that there is a lot of, like you can feel your heart almost going out of your chest. Your heart rate and your blood pressure increases, okay? And then you are tensing your muscles, you're preparing to fight or fly, okay? Your breathing rate increases, your digestive system slows down, so your parasympathetic system slows down, and your sympathetic system really increases, right? When the cortisol gets released, it gets released because then you cannot feel pain, right? You need to do what you need to do in order to survive, and from your brain to your body, there is like a very nice synchronicity here. They are wired to help you to survive whatever moment that feels dangerous, okay? So, so the next time that you are in the forest, right? In the reservoir, here there are so many, and you are walking and you see this, how do you think that your brain and your body will react? So the first thing that might happen for some of you, if you are afraid of snakes, is that your brain, your alarm center might see this as the experience that we learn from. And you might, again, your body might release adrenaline and cortisol, and you will feel at least a little bit of your heart racing again. And the whole situation will escalate a little bit until, you will make more connections and say, oh my God, no. This is not a snake. This is a horse, right? But for a minute, it will take you for a loop, okay? Now, we need to understand how our brains work, because this is something that we do have all in common, okay? We do have all these parts. It doesn't matter where we come from. And here are the parts that are involved with how we react towards traumatic events in our lives. So I was telling you about the amygdala. The amygdala is a tiny, tiny part of our brain, super important. It acts like our alarm center. It's the size of an almond, some people say. Okay, we also have the thalamus, and we also have the hippocampus. And we have here the prefrontal cortex, okay? All of these parts are very important and they connect to one another. So if you see here, we have our 5 senses, and the 5 senses perceive things and get them through our brains, right? The amygdala is wired to sort of to detect danger. It's our alarm center, right? The hippocampus is actually, it acts like our filing center. That's where we get all the information organized. All our experiences are stored in our hippocampus. And then in our prefrontal cortex, which is developed later on in life, like in the mid-20s for women, in the late 20s for men. What ends up happening is that our prefrontal cortex act like a thinking center. So, you know, we organize, we plan ahead, we come out with a solution. All of it is processed in this last part, right? And it makes sense, right? So many times, you know, teenagers cannot drink, teenagers cannot drive, you know, most of the teenagers do not live on their own. Why? Because the prefrontal cortex still is in development, right? They need supervision. They need people to help them to, you know, sort things out, to organize themselves better, to plan ahead, to know how to establish their own goals, okay? And their brain is not completely wired for them to know how to do these things, okay? Now, when something dangerous happens, the first thing that happens is the amygdala gets activated. All our amygdalas do, all right? Then if it is something that, you know, if it is something that is dangerous, but it's not too dangerous, maybe, it can be moderate dangerous or mild dangerous. The amygdala still communicates with the hippocampus, right? And then the hippocampus will assess the situation and will see and check if there is any experiences that are similar. And then, you know, it brings information to the prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal cortex organizes, brings the information, puts everything together, integrates all the information, and comes out with a solution. And the solution is, you know, something that gives a lot of relief to the amygdala, because now things are taken care of. So the amygdala comes down, all right? So it's a very nice circuit that works in synchronicity. And, you know, these different parts really communicate with one another. So, and that's the wonderful thing when that happens, right? So, you know, we can all have different examples of that. You know, sometimes we run late for a meeting or something along those lines, or, you know, we are multitasking. You know, our amygdala goes off a little bit in these situations, right? Or we have an argument with somebody who we loved, or somebody who we don't love, but anyway. So those situations many times can bring on the amygdala. But the beautiful thing is that, you know, if the amygdala has not completely hijacked our brains, if it hasn't taken over, then it means that it can communicate with the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, and we can come out with good solutions. And the good solutions really help us to, you know, feel our sense of competence, feel that we can handle things, feel that, you know, yes, you know, I am empowered enough to come out with a good solution, right? And it helps us to come down. So our hormones are not going to be secreted for our whole body to, you know, be wired up to focus on something that we don't know, you know, focus on a dangerous situation, or focus on something that confuses us, right? And we can go through our day with some sense of safety, with some sense of tranquility and calmness, right? But as you can imagine, when we experience trauma, what happens is that our amygdala will take over. Our alarm center does not stop, right? And it has a very hard time communicating with the hippocampus and communicating with our prefrontal cortex. So now the whole situation has changed. Now we don't have access to other important parts of our brain. And then our amygdala takes over because now our whole system, our brain and our bodies are focusing on surviving the moment. So there is no room for planning ahead. There is no room for establishing goals. There is no room for integrating information. The only room is to survive the moment. And I think that for most of us, if we have lived long enough, and unfortunately for kids who have gone through enough trauma, we could all say that it has been our alarm center that has helped us. And that's why we are here in one piece, okay? What ends up happening with kids, with youth, and adults who have gone through enough times of their amygdalas hijacking their brains, then their amygdalas become oversensitive. So any little thing that might remind them of something traumatic that they had lived in the past that will come from the senses will make the amygdala become fully activated, fully reactive, and sometimes hijacking the whole brain and not having access to the other two parts that are important for processing information. So what ends up happening is, it ends up, people experience the reactions that you saw during the first clip that I showed you, right? That the kids' amygdalas were hypersensitive, right? They are overworking, so any little thing can be perceived as a big deal, as a matter of fact, it is no big deal, right? And you had seen the different reactions just in one classroom, right? And even if we come from a family who have experienced the same trauma, it touches you differently, right? So your reactions are not going to be the same. So, we saw kids who were ready to fight, right? We saw kids who were like, calm, super calm. They still were eating their potato chips. We saw kids who were not sure if they were going to take out their guns or not, right? There were others who were alert enough, trying to figure out what they were going to do next to protect themselves, right? But all of the different reactions in the same situation, okay? But what we all agree is that it happened in a matter of seconds, right? There was something there. Things were really calm, right? And then all of a sudden it went to a full stress, extreme stress for some of the kids who were there. Okay, so we're going to talk more about this. So the survival brain is when the seeing threat, is remembering danger, and is preparing to protect. Versus the learning brain, which is the one that helps us to control impulses, is the one that helps us to think through decisions and effective protection strategies. Okay, so these are like two different types of brains, and it depends on how some parts of our brains are working. All right, so here I'm going to show you this. Yes.
Speaking of brains, I just wanted to flag, Doris was asking if we should offer a break for folks.
That's a wonderful.
If their brains are feeling like they have listened to a lot, it's amazing. Okay. It's amazing what you've been saying, but just wanted to flag that might be a good time for it.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you, Lee. Thank you. So yes, let's take, what would you suggest?
It's totally up to you.
All right. So let's take, how about a 15-minute break, 1-5, and then we come back. So when they need to come back, they need to come back by 12:23. Would that be okay?
Yeah, and I can put on a timer so that folks can see. It'll be on my video, So folks can join us back when that is up. So 15 minutes on the timer.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Just giving heads up to folks, we have about a minute and a half left before we rejoin. So please feel free to grab a snack, grab a drink of water, whatever you need to do to get you ready for the next portion of today's training.
And I believe in breaks, and I cannot believe that I was just kept on going. So,
you were in the zone. When you're in the zone, it is hard.
Funny, because that's one of the constructive criticisms that I tell a colleague of mine, my mentor, and now I'm like, oh my God. But anyway, and we are here until 2, right? Is it 2? Until what time is the training?
Let me just double check so I don't say anything wrong. Yes, until 2 o'clock
All right,
ET.
All right, so let me know when we need to take another break.
Will do.
All right. Yes.
I'll give you a bit of a. It was Doris. Doris flagged it for me, so
Yes,
thank you, Doris.
We're a team. We're a team. All good.
Yes, awesome.
All right. Well, yeah, we're at 12:23. So if folks want to come on back and join us from wherever they may have wandered throughout their break time, come on back and join us for more of today's training.
So this, like I find that this training is a little bit more, what is the word that I'm looking for? It could like make more sense for all of us if we will try to apply it to some of the things that we already know, some of our own experiences, or some of our experiences with the people who we served. So, or a combination of things. So I'm wondering if you would like to let us know some things that have clicked for you so far, some things that make sense, some things that do not, maybe some things that you agree or disagree, or some things that have surprised you, whatever you would like to share from the content that I have shared with you, that would be helpful to me, and I believe helpful to the group. Or if you have any questions.
We did have a question come through a little bit ago. So Charles O. Williams, thank you so much for your patience as we were in the midst of it. So I wasn't able to get that to our trainers. However, the question was, have any of you seen the apps PTSD Coach and ACT Coach? That's a great question.
No, but I will check it out. Yeah. So is there a reason why you are sharing with us that? Is it, Charles, is it super helpful? It brings a lot of good information.
Yeah, Charles, if you want to come off mute, feel free to let us know what gets you thinking about these apps while in this context.
Yes.
And if not, that's totally okay. We can also do a little digging on our side.
I can see that it's an app that helps people with PTSD manage their symptoms, track their symptoms, learn about PTSD, get support, and also the app helps to personalize, features. So that's really great, Charles. Thank you so much for sharing this wonderful resource. Maybe we can put it in the chat so everybody could take a look. I find it very important.
Yeah, happy to put that in the chat.
Thank you so much, Lee. Anybody else? This is the beautiful thing about being adult learners. We all can share resources. We all can share, content. I know that this curriculum is something, is not new, and probably you have heard many of the different things that we are covering. My hope is that, you find some of the content informative, and that you can utilize some of the things into what you do. Yeah. So anything else?
It would be wonderful. I'm sorry, Rocio, to interrupt you. It would be wonderful. I was thinking, since we are in the section of learning brain versus survival brain, and we've just undergone a pandemic of incredible challenge, with the incredible challenges nationally, locally, internally, and there were so many apps and social stories for those with disabilities that were created during the pandemic for our youth, culturally responsive ones, and it was just amazing, because now we were locked in, and our youth were locked in, and they found ways with social media and different types of ways to interact and to share, with emojis and not without emojis. So if anyone here has experience or has heard or worked with and used any types of resources or apps or what have you, that would be wonderful. We have support groups online as well, that are available to many of us, free. But the apps are definitely for those with autism, on the spectrum, with developmental disabilities. I found that was also very conducive and helpful for that population. So if you'd like to share, please do so. Sorry, Rocio.
No, please. No, thank you. Thank you, Doris. Well taken. All right. So I am going to share something that, we already talk about, we all learn by experience. And, sometimes when I want to illustrate this, and I told you, sometimes it helps when you think about your own life and think about some examples. And this curriculum, it's a curriculum that you can also train others. We can give you all the content for you to train others, and it can be easily done. I and Doris will be available to consult with you if you would like to do this, and we can also support you, the first times, so you can feel more comfortable doing it. So when we talk about we learn by experience, and we already went through, how our brain works, and how our body gets wired towards it. I can share with you one example that occurred to me, my own life, right? So when I was around 2 years old, I was almost attacked by a German Shepherd. And obviously I don't have any recollection of that moment. I don't have any verbal recollection of that event. But, I noticed as a child, as I was growing up, that I was super scared of dogs. Like, I was raised in Peru. You hear my thick accent. I came here when I was 19 years old. So, being in Peru, depending on what areas you go through, there are street dogs. I would be super afraid of all the street dogs. I would make sure that I cross the streets, go, like a strength, very took precautions to figure out how I was not gonna be close to dogs, because I was terrified. But I didn't know why. It was like, I was going through my life without knowing why dogs scare me so much. But my whole brain and my body really wired up to protect me from dogs. Until one day, when I was maybe in my 10, 11 years old, their families in Peru always gathered together, and, the conversation happened to be about me and about the incident with the dog that happened when I was 2 years old. And adults felt that it was, like a cute story to relate. But, then I figured out, and it clicked to me that that's why I was so scared of dogs. Like the dog didn't bite me, but it bit my aunt. So, and then obviously I became a trauma clinician, and now I can tell you more about how my brain was working and how, my whole body was reacting towards it, right? But it made enough sense to me to know that, okay, now I know why I was so scared, right? So at 10, 11, I knew, but I still could not control everything about dogs. And I was not really raised with dogs around, so that helped a little bit. Now, years later, I come to the US, and one of my first jobs in the US was to deliver newspapers. Now, I don't know if you have delivered newspapers. That's really a whole different task here. But, in one of the mornings that I was delivering newspapers, out of nowhere, a big dog comes out and starts barking at me. And the first thing instantly that happened for me was I screamed and I called my mom. Like I was like, right? And it came out like I wasn't even thinking about it. It was just like so automatically for me. Now, for some of you, this could be like, well, yeah, when we are scared, we call our mothers, right? But my mom died when I was 11. So, she wasn't really close in any sense geographically to save me. So, like my brain took me back when I was 2 years old, even though I already connected a little bit that, okay, I'm scared of dogs because of what happened to me, right? And, but, like when a similar situation came up, I went back. I definitely went back, and I could tell you that probably, maybe when I was a little girl, I was also calling my mom, right? So this is all to tell you that we learn by experience. And many times, the experience that happened to us very early in life have really have been stored someplace in our brains. And it doesn't matter how old you are still gonna remember, even if you don't have the verbal cognition, your body still knows, right? So Bessel van der Kolk talks about your body scores, and it does. And so this is also important for us to know, because I'm sharing with you one event that happened, right? One event that happened that didn't really paralyze me, but it had some impact in how I was like seeing the world whenever dogs were around. And also it had some impact years later when I was doing something completely different. I was able to put myself together, but you bet that I was scared for a little bit. Okay, so so we are going to go through the learning brain versus survival brain. And here is a colleague describing it the way that he understands it, okay? So that's the important piece. As an adult learners, we can also have our own examples, and we can also explain things, right? In ways that we understand, and hopefully this can come out clear for other people too.
The difference between a learning brain versus a brain in survival mode. So we'll just call it learning brain versus survival brain. And this is the difference. So learning brain is this brain that's open to learning new information, and it's completely okay with ambiguity and grays and vagueness, and it sees the big picture. It like pulls back and is on the balcony, can look over the forest and figure out what's going on. On an emotional level, people in learning brain feel calm, peaceful, maybe a little excited about what they're about to learn, maybe a little playful and having fun too, and definitely curious. And they're not afraid of making mistakes because it's just part of the learning process. And so they're not really thinking about themselves. And they actually feel a little bit of confidence that if they just apply themselves, they might pick up what they're trying to learn. Now, survival brain, on the other hand, is completely different. It's hyper-focused on threat. It doesn't like ambiguity. It wants clear, hard facts. It thinks in black and white terms. It doesn't want anything to be gray at all. And then emotionally, you can imagine that survival brain makes people feel panicky, feel like a little obsessive and afraid of getting things wrong. and they don't feel calm and open to learning new things. They just want to get things over with. And people in survival brain also really don't like making mistakes, and they are afraid of looking stupid too. So students in survival brain don't want to be picked on, they don't want to raise their hand and ask questions and look stupid. And so these people are also filled with doubt about their own ability to learn stuff, and they're afraid that other people can see how stupid they really are. Now it's really important to understand how learning brain and survival brain interact, because survival brain always trumps learning brain. And it makes sense because survival brain is just trying to save your life. And so if it thinks that there's something dangerous happening, you better pay attention to it, right? But the tricky thing is that as survival brain stays on longer and longer, it's harder to get out of that. And it's harder to really go into learning brain. And the way I think about it is kind of like the myth of Sisyphus. You know that guy who has to push a rock up a hill, and then every day it falls back down and he has to do it over and over again? Well, being in learning brain is like being up on the high parts of that mountain. You can see the expanse of what's going on, but it also takes a lot of work to be up there. And at any second, if you're not paying attention and putting effort into it, it's so easy to slip back into survival brain again. And that rock that Sisyphus is trying to push up, well, that's kind of like stress. And the more stressed you feel, the heavier and bigger that rock gets, and it just pushes you back into survival brain quicker. Now the kicker is that for traumatized people, stress is a really rigid and intense thing. And so with trauma, any little stress makes that rock grow way bigger than it normally would. And because people with trauma misperceive ambiguous situations as threatening and stressful, that rock just stays big all the time. Now the good news is that the more you control stress, well, the easier it is to be in learning brain, right? Because that rock.
All right. So you're seeing just one part of what Dr. Ham from New York is providing us to sort of digest, process a little bit more the difference between learning brain and survival brain. So, you know, and obviously we all have different ways to process the information, right? And one of the things coming from a collective view of the world, one of the things that will help the individual to deal with the stress that we are also going to talk later on is all the community support that the individual can have. So the individual does not need to be by himself, herself, you know, in order to keep on, you know, going through the learning brain. So that's another approach. And I think that you're all very good examples of why, you know, many times the work cannot be done alone. And, you know, your interest in learning more about trauma-informed services is because, you know, we want to accompany people to not do it alone and to, you know, keep on helping each other. So, so we talk about the principles of safety. The principles of trauma-informed systems. And the first one, we talk about safety. And establishing safety, as you know, is super important. And is the first step to connect with youth or anybody else in a trauma-informed manner to help them feel physically and psychologically, and many times spiritually safe, right? Socially safe. So there are different contexts where people need to feel safe in order for that amygdala to come down, in order for them to feel grounded, in order for them to be in the learning brain and be more open, right? So what can we do? We can help youth or anybody else to feel safer by being present and engaged, create predictability. When we all know what we are getting into, it's a little bit easier to maneuver. Balance firmness with caring. That's also important. Many times the structure definitely helps. Many times sharing power helps. So I was telling you about the clip where the teacher was sharing the journals with her students, and I don't know if she was too conscious about what she was doing, but that teacher is very wise. And she has her own foundation now in California that teaches other teachers. So what she did, and this is somebody who pointed out to me in one of the trainings that I conducted a while ago, was, you know, her beautiful sort of manner of when she invited the students to come and get the journals, she wasn't really standing up. She was sitting down. So, you know, that was a nonverbal way to share power with her students. And that was also, you know, there are many ways where when we relate to people, where we can definitely, you know, communicate non-verbally and provide that sense of safety too. All right, so it is important to consider to create a trauma-informed safety plan with people who we served, all right? And many times, if we are trauma survivors, it's so important to consider to create our own plan. Okay, so here are some of the things that are important for a trauma-informed safety plan. Call it the way that you want it to. You know, sometimes these big words help us to establish something, but it would be better if you call it the way that made you feel more comfortable, okay? So this is one tool that all staff may use to collaborate with a youth or any other person who has experienced trauma. This is usually a plan shared between a staff and youth to help youth use healthier coping strategies. Okay? So the safety plans, what should include? A brief trauma history, trauma reminders, early warning signs of losing control, calming and regulating behaviors, okay? So I told you a little bit about what happened to me when I was 2 years old, right? You know, one thing, right? So, you know, my trauma reminder were dogs, right? My early warning signs of losing control, my palms were sweating, you know, my heart started racing. I became a little bit more hypervigilant. I would cross out the street if I would see a dog. So there were early warning signs right there. And then, you know, I think that what calmed me and regulate my behavior was to learn more about what happened to me. But there are other situations where we can help people to calm and regulate their behaviors, even though they haven't made the click, they haven't made the connections about, you know, what happened to them, why their systems are now hyperventilating or very hypervigilant, right? So, you know, and the calming and regulating behaviors are things that come to us from our senses. So, you know, many times, I don't know how many of you use like soft music when your system is going up. You know, tasting something sweet for some people helps. You know, smelling lavender or some other odor that could really help you to calm down. Touching something soft, or, you know, something cold or warm, whatever it is that works for you, whatever it is that works for the youth. Seeing something or reading a nice poem, something along those lines can really help and be very beneficial. And oftentimes, you know, as I mentioned before, many times we can all try to be proactive. We don't need to be triggered in order to start using these calming and regulating behaviors. Oftentimes, it is even better if we immunize, is that a word? We put some emotional vaccinations, you know, even before, and so these are emotional immunizations, even before our amygdala gets on it, okay? So trauma reminders or triggers are things, events, situations, places, sensations, and even people that a youth consciously or unconsciously connects with a traumatic event, all right? And that's the key, that sometimes, it's pretty conscious that you know what triggers you. But if it is unconscious, that's really something very hard, because then you cannot even identify the trigger. You can only identify the sensations that oftentimes your body shows you, okay? And that's one good guide for us, because if, if all of a sudden we feel confused or we feel scared, but nothing outside is happening, then, we need to pay more attention, and we can help others to pay more attention, because there is something going on and your amygdala is telling you something. So lost reminders are empty situations, shared activities, rituals, favorite activities, or physical scars, okay? And this is actually important because, we sometimes consider that rituals are such a great thing, but it might be in some instances, but it might be a lost reminder for some other people. So, we need, and because we are all unique individuals, what goes on for you, it might not be the same for another person. That's why it's so important to individualize the safety plans. And now we can also identify hidden reminders. And these are really difficult to identify. These are the ones that cause physical reactions without our being able to understand them, right? Past betrayals can make trust, affection, and connection become hidden reminders of pain. This is just one example. So how do we calm the survival brain? When youth are affected by trauma, they may expect others to compromise their safety. They may expect the worst of people, not the best, right? They might try to feel safe and protect themselves in ways that are risky, dangerous, or destructive. If they are in a survival brain, many times all that we want is to stop the pain and suffering. So we go to great extents to stop it, even if it can alleviate us for a little bit, right? And we don't really think things through. We just want the moment to end. And also can learn, but youth can learn new ways to feel safe, right? From firm and caring adults who are aware of trauma reminders. And that's the work, that's the hope. And no matter how old we are, our brains have this sense of plasticity, right? That, it is our brains now, we know it's like a muscle. So the more that we practice something new, the more that we try to establish other connections that can help us, to live the life that we deserve to live, the better that we will utilize health coping skills. And this goes on for everybody. So what can we do? We can list the actions an adult does to make youth feel unsafe and activate their survival brain. So we can identify what makes a person feel unsafe, what others do that make you feel unsafe. We can consider some ways you and your coworkers can avoid behaviors that make you feel unsafe. So, there are other people who you are serving. So there are like common sort of, like general situations that sometimes happen. Sometimes power struggles make us feel unsafe, right? Sometimes, attitudes make us feel unsafe. People who are not patient with us might make us feel unsafe, right? Making assumptions. So, we can have a whole list of things or situations that can make people feel unsafe. And we all have our own, our very own, and that's important. It's important that if you are part of a service and a community, to identify what are the strengths of the community that you're part of, and what are some of the areas that, your community needs to improve. Okay, so traumatic stress reactions, there are different traumatic stress reactions, right? And now we know that it's not something that intentionally people do, it's something that happens physiologically. There are changes in our brain and our body that make us feel certain ways. So, you know, some of these stress reactions is that we might be re-experiencing events. We might try to avoid them. There is some sort of reactions that have to deal with feeling hyper-aroused or reactive. Also, there are negative alterations in cognitions and mood. And, you know, it can also, people can dissociate. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this. So when we talk about re-experiencing symptoms, we talk about intrusive images, sensations, or memories of the traumatic event that recur uncontrollably. So you are not calling them, they're just coming for you, right? And it can be in the form of nightmares, it can be disturbing thoughts, it can be flashbacks, physiological reactions, and intense or prolonged psychological distress. So, you know, throughout the training, if we have time, we're going to talk about some vignettes. It's so important for us to keep on weaving in the information into situations that we have been part of, that, you know, our work, through our work, sometimes through our own lives. But I'm presenting to you a vignette that has been sort of designed by the different experiences of different clinicians when working with youth who have been highly traumatized. So it's a collage of different stories, okay? So here is Kerry, and this is how he describes his intrusive thought. Kerry is a young man who was shot by a robber who stole his gold chain and speaks about his assailant. I can't get this dude out of my head. I see him every day, every day. Every night I see this dude, and he's like a, so he knows that, you know, what uncontrollably he's thinking does not make sense, but he cannot stop these thoughts. So that's an example of intrusive thought. Okay, no one is going to step to me like that ever again, right? So that's one way of coping, right? That's one attempt to slow down that amygdala. So now I'm not going to allow this to happen anymore. And, you know, with the right guidance, he can sort of figure out a safety plan that will help him, you know, deal with this situation. But, you know, if he's trying to do it alone, and if he's desperately trying to slow down that amygdala, he might take great extents to do something that's not going to be so productive for him in the long run. Okay, so for avoidance symptoms, here are some examples of internal reminders, right? The internal reminders can be thoughts, feelings, or physical sensations that you will definitely want to avoid, right? And the avoidance of external reminders are people, places, objects, activities, situations, conversations. Avoid discussing related issues. So with the internal reminders, oftentimes, unfortunately, people start, you know, trying to numb themselves, for example. So drugs, alcohol, you know, risky behaviors, you know, things like that might help in a very short run, giving you some relief of avoiding these reminders. And sometimes if you do have an amygdala that is super activated, you know, you really wanted to avoid it and you wanted to stop it as quickly as possible. And that can be one resource, not the healthy one, but at least it gives you some relief, even if it is for a few seconds, minutes, or hours. The external reminders are things that we actually, you know, we can see it a little bit more, right? Like people begin isolating themselves. So they are not going to they are not going out, or, you know, they stop going to school, or they stop socializing. All of those things, in attempts to avoid external reminders. So these are situations that are really difficult, right? And obviously avoidance symptoms are there for a reason. And also people need support, because if they do not get the right support, then, those cycles continue being very toxic, and it's not going to help slowing down the amygdala in the way that we want to. So here are some how youth responds to trauma when we talk about alterations in arousal and reactivity. So, youth can become highly irritable, or they can be aggressive, right? They also can show some self-destructive or reckless behavior. Sometimes youth can be very jumpy or quickly to startle. Problems with concentration, right? They are in a survival mode. They are in a survival brain, so they cannot integrate information. They cannot think things through, organize, plan ahead. They also present some sleep disturbance sometimes, and also they feel more hyper aroused and hypervigilance. They start scanning their environment. These are kids who cannot really, many times they are so super aware of who, where people are, who is coming, who is going. Sometimes they sort of select the place where they are going to sit. They need to know, they need to be close to the door, or not behind it. Things like that. Those are some of the responses that kids have, and adults too. And here we can talk more about negative alterations in cognition and mood. So this is the inability to remember parts of traumatic event, okay? But there are persistent negative emotions, persistent difficulty experiencing positive emotions. Oftentimes youth decrease, they present a decreased interest or participation in activities, feeling detached from others, persistent exaggerated negative expectations, persistent distorted blame of self or others. Okay, so this is important to recognize. So, throughout the years, I have worked with different populations, and I was part of the first women's jail diversion program in Connecticut through the Capital Region Mental Health Center. And when we ran the jail diversion, there were women that were coming to our program at different stages of their lives, from young adult women to older adult women. And and I think that you will understand this, but people who do service work, you never forget people who you served. I don't know who served most, if I serve most, or if they serve me. But I remember a young adult woman who was doing better, much better. She wasn't in jail. She wrote poetry, beautiful poetry, and she started going to the community college. She was taking classes. Everything was working out, showing up for treatment. I mean, things were really good, right? But in one of the groups, we were doing a check-in, and she shared with the group that something was gonna go bad. She couldn't really take it. I mean, that things were going so well for her. And this is a very good example of the persistent exaggerated negative expectation, right? Her amygdala still was going off, and there was a negative alteration in cognition and mood for her. And she was really expecting the worst, even though things were really working out for her, and people were seeing her talent and her gifts. So, so that's something that we also need to be aware of. Now, here is another vignette, and we are going to meet Ian and his sense of numbing, his experience with numbing. Ian loses his fear. So a lot of things that made me scared or made me nervous, they don't scare me no more. They don't affect me. Life, if a whole bunch of you kept on looking at me, I used to feel nervous. And if someone kept on like giving me mean looks, I used to get nervous. It don't happen no more. It's like some of the feeling is just gone. If they look at me mean now, I look at them right back like, what, right? So this is the sense of, many of us will call this the sense of defiance, like, but this is a sense of protection, right? And it's a numbing, avoiding the feeling scared, avoiding the feeling nervous. And, when our amygdalas go off and we are in a survival brain, we definitely try to do many different things that are not super conscious, but they're really focused on surviving the moment. And I can see without even doing a test to this kid that his cortisol levels have to be up the roof. So he's numb, he doesn't feel pain. And now he doesn't feel the emotional pain either, not only the physical, but not the emotional one. And that's the way that he has learned to protect himself. So when we talk about dissociation, we talk about the feeling unreal and disconnected from ourselves, right? From the self. And mentally separating the self from the experience. May experience the self as detached from the body, on the ceiling or somewhere else in the room, and may feel as if I'm in a dream or unreal state. Now, dissociation is something that maybe we can all relate at some level, right? There are different sort of, there is a continuum and a spectrum of, the levels of dissociation. So the mild one that maybe we can all relate to is when, you found yourself driving and you don't know where you're going, or you have missed the exit, but you don't know how you missed it. That's one sort of, mild level of dissociation, right? The ones that we describe here are the ones that are more in the extremes. When trauma happened to us, many times, our amygdala, in a way to protect ourselves, will actually help us to dissociate, so we can survive the moment too. And sometimes we can also relate dissociation with sexual abuse, but also with other types of trauma. Okay, so the rates of trauma and PTSD in the juvenile justice system are truly high. And this is something that if you are thinking about training people that are not involved in the juvenile justice system, I have used Think Trauma to train in community colleges, in schools, in outpatient settings. So you could adapt these statistics to the communities who you are presenting the curriculum. But for now, 93% of juvenile offenders reported, as I mentioned to you before, at least one or more traumatic experiences, and on average reporting at least 6, which is very high, right? Youth in the juvenile justice population have rates of PTSD comparable to those of service members returning from the war, from Iraq. And 40% of youth with trauma history are diagnosed with at least one other mood, anxiety, or disruptive behavior disorder. Right, so how understanding trauma can help us to prevent reoffending? Okay, so identifying trauma can improve risk assessment for further offending and lead to rehabilitative services that work, right? knowing what happened to these kids, how the systems have responded in the past, can really guide us through, better sort of services that can really benefit the kids who we are trying to serve. So here is the risk. Determining the likelihood for reoffending and type of services that will rehabilitate. So we are assessing the level of risk. We are also assessing the need, so targeted provision of services that are matched to specific risk for reoffending using effective and proven tools. And the last one is how we respond, our level of responsibility. Youth ability to rehabilitate is maximized by tailoring services to youth needs and strengths, right? So this is important. So we already mentioned this, that youth who endorse different types of trauma, also, unfortunately, they're also diagnosed with other mood disorders or other mental health disorders, such as disruptive disorders, substance use disorders, anxiety disorders, and mood disorders. And so the questions for us are, what are barriers to working with mental health professionals and communicating with them about youth? And what improves working with mental health professionals and helps communication with them about youth? Okay, so what are the barriers and what are the improvements? And please, Ali, let me know if there is any other sort of responses or comments from the chat. So here is actually an activity that if we will have more time, I will welcome you to do. And the activity is to talking to one another in a small groups. And we present you with all these different vignettes of people who, youth who we have collectively sort of put together different stories, but for ways to protect the kids who we serve. We don't really have a complete story for one vignette. So we do have a collage of stories for each vignette. And when you read a vignette, one of the things that we want you to think about is, what are the traumatic experiences and or losses that this kid presents? What are the traumatic reactions? And what could be potential trauma reminders? Okay, so because I haven't shown you the vignettes, but if you are planning to train, in the future, the vignettes are going to be provided to you, and we can share with you the vignettes for the second module. I want you to think about, if you are serving kids or adults, I want you to think about one person in particular and try to answer these questions. What are the traumatic experiences and or losses? What are the traumatic reactions? And what could be potential trauma reminders from what you know? And I'm going to give you, I don't know if I'm assuming that you are serving people who have experienced some trauma. Is that a wrong assumption, or is it a warm assumption? Can you raise your hand for anybody who is serving people who might have experienced trauma? And Lee, can you help me with that?
Yeah. Okay. Looks like we got a whole bunch of people raising their hands.
All right, awesome, wonderful. Yeah. So that's an accurate assumption, if I could say that. So if you don't mind thinking about one person and trying to answer those questions. And I'm going to give you a few minutes. And if you would like to share, that would be awesome. If you don't, that's okay too. So any sharing, anybody would like to speak up? No, no sharing. All right, well, at least for you to think about it, okay? That's important. All right, we're gonna keep up here. And here is something that, you know, also give us hope, right? Like after telling you all about trauma and, you know, the different physiological changes, you know, I hope that you are not hopeless with this, because there is a lot of hope. And I know that, you know, the people who you serve are highly resilient. Otherwise, you wouldn't be seeing them, right? So this is an important clip that reminds us of how we can identify resilience in the people who we served. And, you know, there are many different, I mean, this is only one example, but I hope the invitation is that you can think about your own examples of how, you know, the people who you serve show you how resilient they are. So I don't know how many of you here in the group are football fans. This is the life of a football player. His name is Patrick Willis. This is a real story, and I will share it with you.
It's June in San Francisco, and Patrick Willis is on his way to see his new $5 million home.
Today, you know, I'm going over there for the first time. But it's like waking up for Christmas, you know. It's, I don't know, I got like butterflies and all that. In the house I grew up in, you know, it was a roof over our heads, but at the same time, too, you know, when it rained, it poured, and that was literal.
The 6'1", 240-pound Willis is arguably the best linebacker in football. At 26 years old, he's made 4 Pro Bowls in 4 NFL seasons.
He can be from point A to point B in a flash. He can startle players. You know, you see it in their eye. How in the heck did he get me?
But Patrick Willis's success is grounded in something deeper, more complex, a childhood filled with disappointment and anger that forced him to grow up too fast.
He's a guy that has every reason to quit. He's a guy that has every reason to hate everybody. Greatness is not about the guy that has all the skill and the talent. Greatness is measured by the setbacks that you've had in life. Have you been able to fight through them and become stronger?
Deep in the backwoods of Brewston, Tennessee, 2 hours east of Memphis, there was a double-wide trailer at the end of a dirt path, Patrick's childhood home.
What I had is what they call country strength. It's from growing up in the country and just doing abnormal things like chopping wood. I didn't get running water until I was 8 years old. So we literally had to use the bathroom in buckets at nighttime, put a board over it and whatnot. And next morning, had to take it out down in the woods and get rid of it.
Patrick was 4 when his mother abandoned him and his 3 younger siblings. They lived with their father, Ernest, a part-time logger.
I try to teach them the way I was taught, you know. I try to let them know what's right from wrong and try to learn them the right way.
My dad wanted us to be together because he knew how important like family is, and he knew how important we were to each other.
In 1995, at age 10, Patrick was helping his father support the family. That summer, he began working full-time in the cotton fields to help pay the bills.
I'm like, here you go, Dad. Like, here goes some. Like, I give him like $60 of what I had, you know, or $50, something, but just something, you know. And he would come at me like, "Might forget $20, the light bill due." But then I never know why All of a sudden we come home and the light's not on. He always wants to spend his money on alcohol and drugs or whatnot.
What kind of drugs was he doing?
I don't know what type of drug it was, like, specifically. I just know that whatever it was, it had a metal pipe and plastic wrapped around the end of the metal pipe.
I drank me beer and stuff. I used to smoke a little marijuana back in the day, but I don't know more. But there wasn't no abusing thing, you know, there wasn't no big thing.
He would come out acting all paranoid and asking 1,000 questions, and we like, man, come on, Pops, but we didn't say nothing. We just kept our cool, act like we didn't know what was going on.
But Patrick says there was more going on at home than just drug use.
He just got really, really abusive.
He had a tendency going too far. I mean, you can get a whooping, but it is a part when you overdo a whooping.
Getting hit with pots and pans turned into fists. Because our dad used to say, like, we ain't little no more, so he'll fight us.
You know, I got a little switch or belt or something, I was spanking with my hand, you know. But, it wasn't no killing thing. It just something let them know what they done wrong, you know.
So crazy abusive that I just started looking at him like a stranger.
This is where you used to hang out and start learning your skills?
All right, man, this right here, believe it or not, this right here is where the game of football all started for me. I couldn't afford to play Pee Wee football. Down here, where this pole is, right here, that was one touchdown.
Patrick immersed himself in sports. He became a star in baseball, basketball, and football at Brewston Central High School.
I'd rather be playing sports than to be home. Any day, that was my escape. And I just got to the point to where as long as I don't feel, then I'm fine.
Back home, with his father increasingly unreliable, Patrick found himself in a different role, head of the household.
Patrick was there. He helped us make sure we got our homework done and stuff like that.
We knew that if we didn't get our chores and stuff cleaned up, that it's going to be consequences. He was just like a father figure to us.
On a spring day in 2001, during a family basketball game, Patrick, then 17, made a decision that would change his family forever.
Our dad is so competitive. If we lost, if we was on his team, we got a whooping for it. It was the game-winning point when Patrick went up to make the shot. Patrick elbowed me, so, I covered my mouth. And Patrick, he all happy because he just dunked on me. So I giggled, too, and our dad was like, it ain't funny.
The next thing you know, I saw him hit me all in the face and the head. I'm like, this is it. This is the day that me and my dad are about to fight. Because nobody's ever stood up to my dad.
I didn't hit her hard, I just, she got mad and trying to fight, and I whooped the butt.
And he got ready to grab my hand again, and I ran, I grabbed his hand. I never forget, I grabbed his arm, and it just stopped completely.
And then what happened?
Then he looked back at me, and he was like, boy, if you ever get in between my business again like this here, I'd kill you.
That night, Patrick, his two brothers and sister decided to finally tell school counselors about the years of abuse.
I felt like something crazy was going to eventually happen. Nothing good was going to come out of us, staying there. I felt like it was my job to protect them.
A week later, the Department of Children's Services sent police to the Willis home.
I said, what's going on here? I cousin. I asked what the hell, how I did. I said, what's going on, I said, and he said, well, we come to get your kids. I said, for what? I whooped him, but I ain't abused him.
Ernest Willis was never charged with any crimes. Still, authorities planned to move his 4 children into separate foster homes across the state. Word reached Patrick's high school.
Superintendent came down to my classroom in the hallway, and he pulled me out of class, and he wanted to know if my wife and I would be interested in taking all 4 kids in, because they didn't want to split the kids up.
I said, well, yeah, we can help them. And of course, everybody at the time was like, you don't have a clue what you're doing. 4 teenagers, what are you thinking?
In the summer of 2002, before his senior year of high school, Patrick, along with his younger brothers and sister, moved in with the Finleys.
I felt for the first time in my life, I could be a kid. I could wake up, brush my teeth, and have hot water, and maybe possibly have a girlfriend or something, because I wouldn't be ashamed to like bring them home.
We'd give them an allowance for doing, whatever little chores they had. I can remember Patrick, he would come to us and say, well, do you need any of this for like the light bill? I was like, no, that's your money, you can keep it. He didn't have to worry about basic need kind of things. I think he could concentrate on himself more and what he needed to do.
As a high school senior, Patrick was nominated for the state's Mr. Football Award on both offense and defense, a first for any athlete in Tennessee. In 2003, at the University of Mississippi, he started all 13 games as a freshman and became a two-time All-American, at times playing with a broken hand, sprained knee, sprained foot, and separated shoulder.
Every time I saw him, he had a cast on his ankle, he had a cast on his forearm. What's up with this guy? And when I heard his story, I was like, wow, I'm impressed. We got to get this kid.
The San Francisco 49ers selected Patrick Willis with the 11th pick in the 2007 draft. At 22 years old, Willis had almost everything he ever dreamed of, except for a relationship with his father.
I would just tell him, I want to be able to have a relationship with you. I can help you if you need money for lights and groceries or food or something, but you taking it and you spending it on drugs. He literally pulled out a pocket knife. He said, Pat, you better get away from her. Ain't nobody doing that now. I told you I wasn't doing no drugs.
He come through the front door and his eyes were just red, and I knew he'd been crying. It was the only time I've ever seen him emotional or kind of broken-spirited and upset, ever. He wanted to help his dad so bad. And I think he was emotional because he wanted his dad to help himself, Sorry.
When you have a tough childhood, it makes the tough things very normal. You know that I've been through this, I can handle the rest. This is just a game.
It's also a job, and Patrick works hard at it, just like he's worked hard at everything in his life. In each of his first 4 seasons with the 49ers, he's made at least 100 tackles. In May of 2010, he earned a 5-year, $50 million contract extension. Last October, he bought his first house.
All right. So I'm just going to stop here because here are actually there are a few important things that I would like to cover in this about resiliency. But tell me about your impressions. What are some of the things that you connected with what we are talking about? Anybody would like to share? Through the chat or, unmuting yourself? Right. I know it's hard to share in this setting. Emotional scars mark us for life. Oh yes, that's true. That's true, Veronica. Thank you for sharing. One of the things, I have shown the same video I've been doing this for a while now. It's true that I learned a lot with you and with the groups that I'm sharing this information. And I took Think Trauma to a correctional facility, the York Correctional Facility, and I was training staff there. And one of them pulled me out and was kind enough to pull me out of, in one of the breaks and told me, what you are showing there is very unjust for the father. And, I don't want people to get the wrong impression about people of color. And, this, obviously you see me, I'm also a person of color here. But when she told me, I really took it very seriously because she was onto something too. And, unfortunately, the way that the stories are also told, they reflect they reflect some things, but sometimes we miss the whole picture, right? And if we see this dad, we can see that he was also the victim. And we could sort of speculate what kind of childhood he had to go through. And it was not an easy one, right? And if we could listen, if we could keep on listening to the story also talks about lack of opportunities for a young family, right? And the story also talks about how, how poverty can really impact also the way that we could have access to recovery. The story also tells us a bit also about, thank you, Carmen. It's bittersweet story. They got adopted from a nice family, but he missed his dad. Wanted to help his dad. Yes, yes. And the story also tells us about how trauma impacts the lives and it impacts generations, right? How intergenerational trauma can really have main repercussions for the new generations to come. The story also tells us about, the importance of becoming more trauma informed in many different contexts, right? I think that the school had a very good response and they gathered, like they mobilized themselves to protect the kids by bringing them all together into one household. I feel that, the coach and his wife took a very nurturing approach to say, yes, we volunteer, yes, we will do this. Unfortunately, this father sort of kept being isolated, right? There was not many opportunities for him for the recovery. There were not many opportunities for him to support him. He was a single dad after all, right? And so not justifying his behavior, but knowing what we know about trauma, we could also identify many of the behaviors as symptoms as a result of trauma. So that's something that is also important to consider. Thank you, Angela, for your comment. The difficulty in realizing that you cannot help everyone, and we often need resilience to accept that reality. His inability to help his father, even after his success, must be extremely frustrating, especially since his father never affirmed his success and continued to deny that he needed help with his addiction. That's true. That's true, Angela. That had to be a really hard, experience for Patrick and his siblings, and also for his dad, right? And I'm glad to tell you that I think that throughout the years they were able to make some significant progress in terms of the relationship. Patrick didn't want to see his mom anymore, but he still was attempting to reach out to his dad. And it's all also in the approach, right? So here comes Patrick, humongous successful person, and see his dad and tells him, I'm going to help you, but you're going to have to do what I tell you to, no drugs, no something. And, that's a power struggle there, right there too, right? So sometimes, it's how we also understand how trauma impacts our reactions and what we can do in order to reach out in ways that do not feel undermining, do not feel, like a power struggle. That could also be something important to pursue. And, the traumas did not stop for Patrick. Unfortunately, he lost one of his siblings. One of his siblings drowned. But he was able to pull the family together, and he was able to continue utilizing his support in order to overcome that big loss, and never gave up on his dad. So so that's also important to recognize. So, you know, this is about resiliency, and I'm telling you a little bit more about, you know, how we've seen with the things that we already discussed. And, you know, we are focusing on youth, but, you know, youth will become adults. And also, you know, adults were youth and they were children. And many times, you know, if there are no opportunities to treat what happened to us, then those things are going to escalate and will impact more people as we go along with our lives, right? And that's something that is also important to recognize. Now, you know, I think that we can all agree that what saved Patrick was his connection with the school, right? He was seen there. He was very talented. He did not play one sport. He played many sports, and he exceeded in all of them, right? So, you know, having that sense of community in his school and feeling safe and trusting, right? He could trust the adults there. That make a huge difference. So that's what we're talking about, the principles of trauma-informed system. That school had a lot of things that were really working out. And it worked out, and it benefited Patrick and his siblings, right? Unfortunately, it did not benefit his dad directly. Indirectly, it did. So, so the other thing would be, I'm gonna share again this because I wanted to make sure that I cover everything. So now you're seeing my screen here again. So the question is, what childhood adversities were portrayed in this clip? What did you see as a childhood adversity there? Think about it. So we talk about physical abuse. We might talk about, you know, the adversity of having a dad with substance abuse issues, you know, the adversity of having a mom who left the family, the adversity of poverty, right? Some of the main basic needs not being, couldn't be afforded. So all of those things are considered adversities, right? And what contributed to his resilience? What else do you think that contributed to his resilience besides the school? His sense of competence on different sports, feeling empowered, self-confident, right? All of those things. So understanding resilience is how we manage challenges, right? And we do manage them with assessing, you know, the type of assets that we have and the resources. And for Patrick, right, there was a sense of self-efficacy. He was good at many things, and people were seeing, a whole community was behind him. You know, that really helped with his self-esteem. He could see that he was really competent on things. You know, and they don't talk about his spiritual belief, but I'm actually wonder if this was also another of his strengths. And then, you know, resources, you know, when we think about resiliency, we can think about family support as a resort. We can think about peer support. We can think about community connections and school connectedness. And all of these things, if we think of Patrick, you know, his siblings were his family support, but also his foster parents were also the extension of his family support. You know, through sports, I think that he got a very good peer support. The community connections that he got through his school connectedness was very present, right? So these are some things that we can also think about whenever we're working with, whenever we're serving youth or adults, and obviously children, right? So what specific assets or resources do you think support youth who have experienced trauma? What are some of the things that you see in your daily activities? That's for you to think about. So rebuilding beyond survival. Youth whose functioning declines due to trauma exposure can recover when given opportunities to rebuild their lives, right? So what can we all do? No, not take their behavior personally. That's important. Let them know it is okay to feel upsetting feelings. Help translate their behavior into feelings and words they can express in a healthy way. Work with them to reduce or avoid unnecessary reminders, and invite youth to share what is most frustrating about stressful situations and brainstorm healthy ways to deal with it that addresses it directly. All right, so that's important. So what are things you can do or say to help you feel safe? And that's the question. What are some of the things that you can do or say to help you feel safe? Anybody? I will encourage you that if you do have time, and I know it's Tuesday, and we do have our other session on Thursday, but if you do have time, maybe if it is not this week, but during the weekend, if you haven't seen Freedom Riders, try to see it. And if you haven't, and if you have, just try to rewatch it. Every time that I watch that movie, I get new things. I'm. It's not that I get new things, but new sort of processing on that movie. But one of the pieces that from the movie that I also value is how that teacher was able to see the students. And many times we walk through the world, we walk through, our daily routine without seeing each other. But when you see a person through it, that sometimes makes a big difference because you see the essence of somebody very unique and special. And sometimes we even forget to see our own uniqueness. So that's also another invitation for us this week to see ourselves for who we truly are, the special individuals that we are, and the special individuals that we are also becoming. And that sense of safety, as we mentioned before, it comes in different sort of ways, right? And oftentimes it are the simple things that can make us feel more welcome, a sense of belonging, a sense that you are not judged or criticized, a sense that you're part of. Those are some things that can make us feel a little bit safer each time that we interact with people who are invested in our own recovery and invested in our own growth. So with that, here are the take-home messages. Trauma affects behavior. Resilience and recovery are possible, and we all can make a difference. And I hope that you join us again on Thursday. And if you have any questions or any comments or any suggestions, recommendations, please feel free to reach out to one of us. In the chat, you had my email, Doris' email, Lee's email. So we can, feel free to reach out. And I truly hope that you have a very nice days until we meet again. And I know that we are gonna, if you don't have any questions, we can end now, but if you do have any questions or comments, feel free to stay and we can talk for a little bit. I didn't give you another break, but I think that now you're free to go a little bit earlier. And Lee, I don't know if you have any other things that you need to cover.
I'm just gonna share some slides real quick.
Yeah, please.
All right, so just a reminder to join us on Thursday for day 2 of the training. I'll post a link in the chat for that if you don't already have it. You can sign up for our newsletter and follow us on social media. You can also email us at newengland@mhttcnetwork.org, and this is our website, which I'll also post in the chat, so we can stay connected. Thank you so much for joining today.
Mhm.